everyone, welcome to another story time here in Nature, Poetry, and Stories. Did you miss me last week? I missed you too, and I'm sorry I was not able to record a video because I went to visit friends, and while I was there, I got you a picture book about one of the places that I visited in France. It's the Palace of Versailles. Are you excited to know about the palace? Well, I'm excited to read this to you. So if you're ready, I am ready too. Let's start. The Palace of Versailles. Louis XVIII, the young king of France, really liked to go hunting in the area surrounding Paris. But at night, he often had to sleep in a modest inn. Maybe he could build a country house. In 1623, the king chose Versailles, a village in the middle of the forest and swamp, as the location of his new hunting lodge. Over time, the lodge was made bigger and bigger until it became a beautiful palace. Louis XIV, the son of Louis XVIII, inherited Versailles. He loved it. In 1664, major construction began. The king asked his architect Louis Louvet to add more buildings around his father's palace. The construction project, which employed thousands of workers, lasted a very long time. Louis XIV would keep improving his home for the rest of his life. The king wanted his property to be as beautiful as possible. His landscape architect, André Lenotre, created French-style geometric gardens. On each side of the paths that lead to the Grand Canal, there are many surprises: a maze, an outdoor theater, groves, and ponds. Here is the Water Theater Grove, one of Louis XIV's favorites. It was his own idea. Visitors to the gardens can also find 300 statues of mythological figures. Magical. What about inside? Everything there is luxurious too. Charles Lebrun, the king's official painter, was in charge. He hired some of the best artists of his time to help decorate. The king's state apartments, a group of 7 connected rooms that were used for official ceremonies, are majestic. The ceilings are painted. The walls are inlaid with marble and covered with velvet, and the rooms are filled with furniture made of silver or gilded wood, busts, and paintings. Before he even lived at Versailles, Louis XIV threw fancy parties there. He loved music composed by Lully and plays written by Molière and Racine. How magnificent! Louis liked to dazzle people, and he chose the sun as his symbol, so he became known as the Sun King. The fountains came to life. This was quite a feat because the water had to be brought from far away through a complicated network of dams, pumps, and pipes. In 1682, Louis XIV left the Louvre Palace, where French kings lived in Paris, and moved to Versailles with his court, the nobles in the kingdom. The king did everything in public. His life was governed by very strict rules known as etiquette. 8 a.m. 100 courtiers attended the getting up ceremony. 10 a.m. Louis went to mass. The whole court had to be there. 11 a.m. The king's council. Louis listened to his ministers, then made decisions. 1 p.m. The king lunched alone. His gardener, Jean-Baptiste de la Quintini, used new techniques like greenhouses to grow peas and strawberries even in the winter. Delicious! Afternoons were for hunting or taking a walk in the gardens. Who would accompany the king? Everyone wanted the honor of being invited. Several times a week, there were evening parties in the ceremonial king's state apartments. People played billiards or cards and they danced. At 11:30 p.m., the king went to bed. following the same ceremony as in the morning, but in reverse. This is the Hall of Mirrors, one of the many additions to the palace. In 1684, it replaced the terrace that linked the king's apartment to the queen's apartments. Every morning, the king walked through this room, which is the most famous room in the palace. The courtiers could try to get his attention. This is also where he received foreign ambassadors. They had to cross 74 meters to bow to His Majesty. Versailles was a magical place, but not always a comfortable one. In winter, it was bitterly cold. The 1,300 fireplaces were mostly for decorations, couldn't keep the palace warm. Those who weren't too sensitive to cold, including the king, would dash to the Grand Canal, which was completely frozen over. There, they would organize sleigh races, very fashionable. Louis was always on display among a crowd of courtiers, and he began to find it suffocating. He asked Julie Duan Mazat, his new architect, to build him a little palace of pink marble. This became the Grand Trianon, located a kilometer and a half away from the palace. The king liked to take refuge there, sometimes with friends and family. Potted plants in the garden were changed every day to keep the elegant place lively and sweet-smelling. When Louis XIV died in 1715, his great-grandson became king. Louis XV also lived in Versailles, but he changed some things, making the apartment smaller and warmer. Etiquette was still alive and well, but the king found it burdensome. He had another very simple residence, the Petit Trianon, built near the Grand Trianon. After the reign of Louis XV came that of his grandson, Louis XVI. His queen, Marie Antoinette, didn't like Versailles, so she spent a lot of time in her country hamlet, built near the Petit Trianon. In 1789, the French Revolution happened. The French people didn't want a king anymore. Louis XVI and his family were driven out of Versailles. This luxurious palace was only lived in for 107 years. The palace and the gardens of Versailles are famous throughout the world. Millions of tourists visit each year. It's impossible to see all the wonderful sights in just one trip. So enjoy your visit if you go visit the place. There you can see the marble courtyard, the peace salon, the orangery, the clock room, the royal stables, and Apollo's Baths Grove. The end. Did you like our story for today? The Palace of Versailles is beautiful in the inside, and the back has beautiful gardens, not just one but several gardens, and it's gonna take you several days just to explore the entire place. So if you're going to visit the Palace of Versailles, make sure you wear comfortable clothing and comfortable shoes, and you can ride a go-kart too to take you around the different gardens. So I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next week here in Nature and Poetry and Stories. Have a good night and sweet dreams.